Good morning, Sun Valley. Welcome to our services here at the Sun Valley Church of Christ. We're indeed grateful that you made that decision to be with us here this morning. We believe that we're stronger together, and by coming together, we can edify and build up one another. So thank you for making that choice to be here. And if you're unable to be with us, if you're ill or for whatever reason, and you've tuned in online, we thank you for doing that as well. We want to pray that you will be edified by what you hear today. So thank you for being here. As Glenn mentioned, our minister is Sean Hockdorf, and he's traveling. So I'm one of the members who've been asked to say just a few words this morning. So come back next week and you can hear him. Thank you for being here. This morning I've entitled our lesson, What Does the Lord Require of Me? What does the Lord require of me? Now this is a question that people have been asking for ages. And this is a question that is verbatim out of the Bible. It's actually found in the Old Testament in the book of Micah. Now Micah, as some of you may remember, was a minor prophet in the Old Testament who lived about 700 BC or 700 years before Christ. And he was prophesying about Israel. And he was telling Israel that effectively, as a nation, we need to change our ways or the nation will fall into ruin. And as he begins to talk to Israel about that, he asks this question, and this is where we're going to pick up our text this morning. In Micah chapter 6, starting in verse 6, Micah says, "With what shall I come before the Lord and bow down before the exalted God? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, with 10,000 rivers of olive oil? Shall I offer my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul?" In verse 8, "He has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God." That last piece, to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God, is effectively what Micah was saying is the most important thing. He listed out some material possessions, and he said, perhaps, what do I do for my Creator? What do I do for the Almighty who has given me so much? And instead of those material blessings, he says the most important is to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with God. And so this morning, we're going to look at a few passages on ways that we can do those things, and maybe some things we should be doing in our day-to-day life. What does the Lord require of me? Number one, we need to act justly. Effectively, we just need to do what is right. Now, if you think about the children of Israel and what they had learned, they were under the law of Moses. They were under the 10 Commandments. And some of those are listed here in Exodus chapter 20, verses 12 through 16. The Bible says, "Honor your father and your mother, so that you may live long in the land the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor." In other words, don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, don't kill. And if you think about those, that's a pretty good base set of what to do. And if people are not religious and maybe they don't believe in the Bible, most people will tell you those are pretty good ideas. They may not agree with all of the 10 Commandments, but for the most part, they'll say that's a pretty good standard by which to live. But I would recommend to you, and that is really the minimum starting point. If you think about, it's just a list of what not to do. And so while that is the minimum, we need to continue to progress that and not just set at the minimum of what not to do. We sang a song a few minutes, "Pure in Heart, O God." And that's effectively the thought of that song is we want to start, but we want to build every day. We want to continuously improve and continuously get closer to God. In the New Testament, Jesus expanded upon that principle of the 10 Commandments. We sometimes call it the Golden Rule. In Matthew chapter 7, verse 12, the Bible says, "So in everything do to others what you would have them do to you, for this sums up the law and the prophets." We often call that the Golden Rule, and we paraphrase it, "Do unto others as you would have them do unto you." And if you think about the 10 Commandments that we just talked about. Don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, don't kill. This one is more active. You're going out and you're looking for ways that you can help your fellow man. You're building on that acting justly and doing what is right. Galatians chapter 6, verse 10 adds on to that and says, therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, especially to those who belong to the family of believers. In other words, if we are going to act justly, if we are going to do what is right, if we're going to serve people, we should be looking to serve first and foremost people who are here, people in church, people who are fellow believers. Let's especially do good and serve as we do right. In other words, act with fairness, act with honesty, and act with integrity. That is the first thing we should be doing. Now, if we don't do that, we have a choice. We can not act justly, and we cannot do right, and you will typically wind up dining at the buffet that is known as humble pie. And I know for myself speaking, I haven't always been humble, and humble pie makes a very bitter dessert. And I suspect some of you might be able to relate to that as well. And I was reminded of a story in the Old Testament from the book of Esther about a guy who dined at the buffet and ate a lot of humble pie. And that guy's name was Haman. And some of you may not remember that story. Haman, to set the scene, he was a guy who did not act justly. He did not do right. And for the most part, we would consider him a scoundrel. And there was another guy in this story that was a pretty good guy by the name of Mordecai. And Mordecai did as best he could to act justly and to do right. He wasn't perfect, just like none of us are perfect, but he was trying to do right. And so Haman was in a position of power. He was a scoundrel, but he was in the king's court. And the king had summoned Haman because the king had something he wanted to run by Haman, one of his trusted advisors. And this is where we're going to pick it up in Esther chapter 6, verse 6. When Haman entered, the king asked him, what should be done for the man that the king delights to honor? Now Naaman thought to himself, who is there that the king would rather honor than me? You get the picture? So Haman's been summoned, and all of a sudden the king asks him, I need to honor somebody. And Haman, not a very humble guy, thinks, the king wants to do something great for me. So in verse 7, so he answered the king, and he said, for the man the king delights to honor, have them bring a royal robe the king has worn, and a horse the king has ridden, one with the royal crest placed on its head. Then let the robe and horse be entrusted to one of the king's most noble princes. Let them robe the man the king delights to honor and lead him on the horse through the city streets, proclaiming before him, this is what is done for the man the king delights to honor. So you get the picture? So effectively, Haman is saying we need to have a great parade. We need to pull out all the stops. We need to have all of what the king, we want everyone to think effectively, this is the king. So in verse 10, so at once the king commanded Haman, get the robe and the horse and do just as you've suggested for Mordecai, the Jew, who sits at the king's gate. Do not neglect anything you've recommended. So Mordecai, again, that was the guy that Haman really hated more in life than anyone. And so instead of this grand parade that he thought he was going to be giving for himself, now he had to do that for the person that he despised. And Haman knew if he did not follow the king's order, he would be executed. So Haman very quickly had to eat a lot of humble pie because he was effectively leading the parade of the guy he did not like at all. Haman never changed his ways, and later on, he lost his life. He was executed. And he wound up figuring that if you don't act justly and do what's right, you too can end up eating humble pie. I can't leave the book of Esther without talking just a little bit about the couple of verses that sum up that book. It's a book that I've always liked just for a very short meaning. If you remember the story of Esther, she was a queen, and she became queen in a very interesting way. She wasn't expecting to be queen. And Mordecai, the same guy who was here, talked to Esther, and he said, Esther, I need you to go before the king, and I need you to talk to the king and persuade him on behalf of the Jewish people, because we need the king to help out the Jewish people, or the Jewish people are going to be annihilated. Now, Esther didn't want to do that. She knew that if you went before the king without being summoned, you could be killed, and so she was afraid. There's a couple of verses in Esther that kind of sum up the whole book. Mordecai looked at Esther and he said, you know, Esther, maybe God put you in this position for this exact moment. Or in other words, maybe you've been put in this place of power in her instance, or in this situation for a time such as this. Why is that on my mind? A few days ago, I got a phone call that said, hey, Sean's going to be gone, and we need somebody to fill in. We've asked everybody else, and there's nobody left. Can you do it? Didn't exactly know how to take that, but I assumed it was all good. And the first thing I thought was, I'm not sure I want to do that. I've got a lot of responsibilities at work, got a lot of things going on at work, very short notice. We're going to camp today. The kids, we go to Copper Basin Bible Camp, a lot of things with the kids, they're out of school. I don't know if I want to do that. And I thought of that for just a second or two. And then I kind of thought back to Esther. Maybe God put you in this place for a time such as this. And so as you go out and you start to serve, I don't know how all that works, but maybe ask yourself, maybe I'm being asked to serve, or maybe I'm given this opportunity for a time such as this. What does the Lord require of me? Act justly and do what is right. In other words, develop a strong sense of character. Everyone tries to define this thing called character, and it's not hard. Character is doing what's right when no one else is looking. You can get everything that money will buy without a lick of character, but you can't get any of the things money won't buy. You can't get happiness. You can't get joy. You can't get peace of mind. You can't get winning relationships without character. In other words, act right. Be people of character. Number 2, what does the Lord require of me? The Lord requires us to love mercy. And if we love mercy, we are going to be kind to others. If you think about the mercy that God has shown each and every one of us, we must show mercy and kindness as a response to that. And the prior one, when we were thinking and just discussing about acting justly, that was kind of the minimum baseline of what the Lord requires. But this one, loving mercy, that one's going to require some spiritual growth. It's going to take each of us to examine and think about ourselves and see how can we grow. Romans chapter 5 verse 8 says this, God demonstrates his own love for us in this, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. If God loved us so much, he was willing to send Christ for us. He was that kind to us. That compels us to be kind to others. On the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 5 verse 44, Jesus said, but I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. If you think about the golden rule, the 10 commandments, don't cheat, don't kill, don't steal, don't lie. Pretty easy, you don't have to do anything. And then you say, okay, do unto others. Well, I've got to be a little active, but I can rationalize in my mind, I'll do that for people I like. But what does Christ say on the Sermon on the Mount? On the Sermon on the Mount, if we're to be kind to others and love mercy, we need to also love people we don't like. We need to love our enemies. That gets difficult, doesn't it? At work, I've heard it said, and I've probably used it a time or two, it's hard to soar with the eagles when you're surrounded by a bunch of turkeys. Is that right? Maybe that's me, but perhaps you've had that problem as well. Some people are just difficult. That's the way life is. But we have to deal with them, and that's okay. That helps us grow, and that helps us mature, and that just makes us stronger and makes us better people. And so when dealing with those difficult people, maybe some of the turkeys we might call them, let's try to share Christ's forgiveness, maybe not our meanness. Let's try to share Christ's patience and maybe not our irritability. And then let's try to share Christ's kindness and maybe not our harshness. In other words, let's do, even though it's not easy, let's try to take people who are difficult with, and let's try to share Christ's love. In Luke chapter 6, 35 and 36, it goes on with the same thought. It says, "But love your enemies, do good to them, and lend to them without expecting to get anything back. Then your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High, because He is kind to the ungrateful and to the wicked." Verse 36, "Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful." And that really goes back to sum it up. God has shown us mercy. He's shown us an immense amount of mercy with Jesus Christ, with everything we've been given. How much have we been entrusted in our lives from all of our blessings? And because He's been merciful, even to people we don't like, Jesus died for maybe some people that weren't really good. He died for me as well. But let us do our best to be kind to others as well. Angry words. We sang that a few minutes ago. Let them never. We need to be kind to others, not in just action, but also in speech. Let us be people of action and guard our hearts and our words to be kind. I'm reminded of a story I heard once about balloons. And at work, sometimes I go to leadership conferences or self-help seminars, and there was this story of a seminar where everyone, when they showed up, they were handed a little index card, and they said, "Write your name on it." What they did was they punched a hole in that card, and they tied it to a helium balloon. And now they had not quite 100 people, maybe a few more, maybe a few more. And they took all those balloons, and they moved them into another room. And the person said, "Okay, here's what we're going to do. When I say go, I want you to go into the other room. I want you to retrieve the balloon with the card with your name, and then I want you to come back here. And if you do that, we've got a pretty significant prize for you, but we're only going to give you a few minutes to do that. So when I say go, I want you to take off and do that, and then get back here as quick as you can." So they said go. And what happened? Everybody rushed out the door through the other room. It was effectively chaos. People are bumping into each other. Someone would grab a balloon, look at the card, wrong name, let it go, and try to run around this small confined space with a lot of people. Time was called. Nobody had found their name. So they said, "Okay, let's repeat this experiment, and let's do it again, but at this time, instead of looking for your name, what I want you to do is go in there, grab the first balloon you find the name of the person on that balloon, and then go find that person and give the balloon to them." They did it in the same exact time frame, and what happened? When time was called, everyone had their balloon. Now, why is that? You know, it's very similar to what happens with us, maybe with happiness or in service. We can get so busy looking for ourselves and maybe our own happiness and doing what we want to do that we miss where our opportunity and where happiness truly lies. When we go out and we can communicate and start searching for other people, it's typically a lot easier to find happiness and find those people than it is if we just try to internalize it and do it for ourselves. In other words, we need to be people of service who are willing to be kind to others. Helping others will bring us closer to God. In Galatians chapter 6, verse 2, it says, "Bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ." So as we think about service, don't let us look at it as a burden, but let us look at it as a blessing. We cannot help everybody, but everybody can help somebody. And so let us go forward as we continue to ask, what does the Lord require of me? Let us love mercy, let us be kind, and let us find somebody to help. Number 3, what does the Lord require of me? In Micah chapter 6, the verse says, "Walk humbly with God." Walk humbly with God. Now, when we think about this one, this is the one that takes the most spiritual maturity of all of the ones we've discussed. If you think about acting justly, that was the minimum standard. Recall back to the 10 Commandments. Don't don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, don't kill. Oh, okay, I can just sit at home and do most of that. If I try to live the golden rule and try to do unto others, I've got to get a little more active. But then when I see the mercy that God has shown me, I've made a little spiritual growth and progression. So now I'm looking how I can help others. But walking humbly with your God, this is step 3. This is the one that takes more maturity. And the first thing we need to realize, walking with God, that's a choice. If you think about the Old Testament, Joshua was confronted with that very, very same problem. And in Joshua chapter 24, verse 15, it says, "But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you," notice the bold text, this is Joshua speaking, "choose for yourself this day whom you will serve." And he goes on to say whether the gods your ancestors served beyond the Euphrates or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you were living. "But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord." Joshua realized this is a choice, and if we are going to be spiritually mature, we first have to make that choice to serve God. In the New Testament, Jesus expands upon that, very similar to what we've seen with some of these other passages, but this is the parable of the publican and the Pharisee. Now, you may remember a publican is effectively a tax collector. Those are hated people. I'm not sure if that's improved over 2,000 years or not, but back then they were very, very unscrupulous. They would cheat people. So publicans were looked down upon because they would cheat people. The Pharisees, however, were very pious, religious individuals. And so in this parable, it's a very interesting one that Christ tells. So let's look at it. Luke 18, starting in verse 9. "To some who were confident of their own righteousness and looked down on everyone else, Jesus told this parable. 2 men went to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector," or publican. "The Pharisee stood by himself and prayed." All right, get the picture. Here's the Pharisee. "God, I thank you that I'm not like other people, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even this tax collector." Probably pointing to the guy. "I fast twice a week, and I give a tenth of all I get." But the tax collector who was standing over there, what did he do? He stood at a distance. He would not even look up to heaven, but he just beat his breast. And he said, "God, be merciful on me, a sinner." I tell you that this man, rather than the other, went home justified before God. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. You know, it would be very easy for us to say, and effectively pray the same thing and say, "God, we're really thankful we're not like the Pharisees." We could say that, but we'd effectively miss the whole point of that. Pharisee was a good guy, apparently, who fasted twice a week. How many people here fasted twice last week? Unless it was for medical, probably not many. Or give a tithe, the tenth of all they've got. Doing a lot of things, but where was his heart was really the key piece. But what did the publican say? The publican knew, the tax collector knew that he was a sinner. And he had a humble attitude. And he said, "Lord, just help me to be a better person and to do what's right." And, you know, I think that's what we need to continue to do, is realize God has done so much for us. Let us always be humble. Let us always be grateful for what he's given to us. And let us always say, "I'm not perfect. I'm just a sinner, but I'm trying to get better every day." Let us be more like the publican. Because humble pie does make a bitter dessert. Who was not being humble here? And who did Christ say was doing better? The one who was humble. Let us continue to not eat at the buffet of humble pie. James chapter 4, verse 8 says, "Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you." So as we continue to progress our walk, as we continue to mature our faith, continue to draw close to God. Now, how do we do that? Some of the things that we should be thinking about, some of the things we should be spending our time on. It doesn't matter what you do in life. Most of the time, you have to spend time on it to get good at it. It doesn't matter if it's sports, if it's school, if it's hobbies, if it's anything you want to do that's worthwhile. It often takes time and practice to get good at it. And in the New Testament, if we want to mature our faith and get better at our faith, to take it to that higher level, to continuously improve, we need to spend more of our time and thought on the fruits of the Spirit. Galatians chapter 5, 22 and 20 through 23. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things there is no law. In other words, as we continue to walk, let us focus on what is good and continue to improve those every day. Even as we continue to improve our faith and focus on those things, we need to realize that our faith will be tested. That is part of the maturization process as we get older and as our faith continues. I'm reminded of the story found in Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I think more modernly they're called Rack, Shack, and Benny, if some of you have seen that. And so those three guys were looking to do what was right. Back to character, they wanted to do what was right when no one was looking. And in this case, they had been acting justly, but they were likely going to be executed because they hadn't followed one of the commands. And so they were going to be thrown into a fire. And so picking it up in verse 16, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him, King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we're thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it. And he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But I like this next verse in 18 when I think of this story where they say, even if he does not, we just want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you've set up. They survived. They came through that fire. They came through that fire stronger than when they started it. But I really like that where they say, you know, King, we just want you to know we're going to do what's right. And God's going to deliver us. He may deliver us on this side of life, or maybe it's on the other side of life. But he's going to deliver us. And so we're not concerned with what you may hold against us. We're going to do what's right, even when no one's looking or when they're looking. And so perhaps it was a time such as this that they were in that very specific situation, similar to what Esther said. As we continue to walk through some of those trials, I've heard, I appreciate this saying more as I get older, if you want to hear God laugh, tell him your plan. How many of you, if you think back to when you were much younger, had plans for what you were going to do in life? You know, maybe by the age of 20, maybe 25, you'd make your first million or second million. Maybe it didn't go as well. Maybe that turned out to 30. And then you said, okay, I'm going to get married, maybe have, you know, however many kids you want, drive a sports car. Well, that many kids won't fit in a sports car, so maybe. And then all of a sudden life happens. And life happens, and you meet some of those forks in the road. Or maybe, like Esther, you were put in a specific time and instance, and your life direction changed. And you look back and you realize that has made all of the difference. You know, our plans don't always work out the way that we want them to. And with some of those plans come worry. But we need to remember God is powerful. And when I look back at all these worries, I remember the story of the old man who said on his deathbed that he had had a lot of trouble in his life. A lot of trouble in his life, most of which had never happened. And that's a quote by Winston Churchill. And isn't that the same with us? We can think through all and worry about all these different things, and most of the time, they never happen. Anybody like Panda Express? Maybe that's just me. If you go to Panda Express, they'll serve you rice bowls and teriyaki chicken or Angus beef, and they'll give you a little fortune cookie at the end of your meal. And so you unwrap this fortune cookie and you break open, you eat half of it, and then you pull out this little piece of paper. You know, don't eat the whole thing or you'll eat the piece of paper. But break it open, pull out the piece of paper, and then you read it. And not too long ago, I got a fortune that I really liked out of it. And the fortune said this. It said, fear can keep you up all night, but faith makes one fine pillow. And if you think about what we've been discussing this morning, we can have worries in life, but as we grow and mature on what God requires of us and we mature in our faith, we can rest better knowing that our faith gives us peace and that faith makes one fine pillow. To kind of sum it all up, in Micah, everything we've been discussing this morning, this is the passage that effectively bookends it. It's Solomon's conclusion of the matter, where he said, let us hear the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every work into judgment with every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil. So in conclusion, what does the Lord require of me? First, we need to act justly. Remember that we're going to do right even when no one else is looking. Next, in Micah, we need to love mercy. We need to grow in faith, and we need to be kind to others. And then third, we need to walk humbly with God. We need to mature a faith that endures, a faith that is built on service, knowing that that faith, like the fortune cookie said, it makes one fine pillow. What does the Lord require of you? Act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. It's our prayer that we'll be drawn closer to God, and we'll do that more this week and in our upcoming life. So the question comes to you now. Have you acted justly by obeying Christ? We all have a choice, but have you obeyed the New Testament Christianity that Jesus Christ calls us to do? Do you love the mercy demonstrated by God through Jesus? In Romans 5:8, we looked at that one a minute ago, but God demonstrates his love for us in this. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. And are you walking humbly with God through obedient Christian life? In other words, have you decided to be a New Testament Christian? If you haven't made that commitment to Christ, we would encourage you to do that. We believe that you need to believe that he is the true, the living Son of God, to turn from your past sins, to be baptized, to arise and walk in newness of life. And if maybe you've never heard that before, we'd love to discuss that more with you. But if you have that need, now's a great time to do that, as together we stand and as we sing.